when someone's getting a hard time because they believe what I believe, I have a policy, and my policy is that I publicly state that I agree with them. I think that's the best thing you can do when someone is facing that sort of pressure. Now, with Kate Forbes, virtually everyone takes the, oh, people shouldn't pick on Kate because of her views line, but that's completely the wrong line to take. I mean, when I'm an MSP, listen to what I have to say when they're debating whether or not Anna Sarwar should become First Minister. I will say, of course he shouldn't, because his values and views are appalling. So there's no way he should do that. And people are just doing the same to Kate, just from a different perspective. I mean, currently there's a Lib Dem down in England talking about like some sort of legal action against the Lib Dems because they wouldn't let him be a candidate because he holds views totally opposite to the Lib Dems. I mean, it really is a bit bizarre. Anyway, so the accusation made by the Greens is that Kate Forbes thinks that homosexual relationships, homosexual sex is wrong, and that she doesn't agree with same-sex marriage. Now, what does she actually think about these issues? Well, that's not entirely clear. She has said that she wouldn't have voted for same-sex marriage in the past, so she wouldn't vote. She wouldn't try and repeal the act. Now, homosexual sex, I mean, she said the opposite. She said she thinks homosexual sex is not wrong. But to be honest, I don't believe her. I think she actually believes that it is. So as quickly as I'm springing to Kate's defence, it may be that she'll be muddying the waters and even denying what I believe that she believes. So in all the, don't pick on Kate, it's really bad. Kate's been given a really hard time because of her views. What's missing in the debate is someone saying, well, actually, I agree with those views and this is why they make sense. And that, I think, is my job in this video. Because otherwise the impression can be given that everyone who holds these views, they're a bit embarrassed by them. They haven't got anything positive to say about them. The best they can say is, please don't pick on us because we've got these weird opinions. Whereas I want to say something, apart from that, something more than that. Now, the views I'm going to express here about homosexual sex, homosexual relationships, they're personal views. I will also talk about Scottish Family Party policy. It's important to distinguish the two. So when I'm deciding whether something is right or wrong, there are three things that I bear in mind. Number one, intuition. Number two, reason. Number three, revelation. Right, let's see how they stack up for me when it comes to homosexual relationships. Right, intuition, also known as conscience. Now, I believe that our conscience is a faculty that gives us direct access to moral information. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to reason. We just know that some things are wrong, and we just know that some things are right. Now, some people might say, oh, that's really flimsy and irrational. That's a debate for another day. But these people, they rely on their conscience as well. That's where your moral arguments start from. So if someone said, I'm Professor so-and-so, all the ethics professors in the world, we've come up with a knockdown argument where actually torturing babies for fun is absolutely fine. And if I looked at that argument and thought, that argument seems right to me, I can't see what's wrong with it. It seems true. It seems like they have proved that torturing babies for fun is absolutely right. I would say, well, but actually I don't care. Even though I can't see what's wrong with your argument, I'm going to ignore it because my intuition, my conscience tells me that's wrong, and nothing you can say is going to change that. Now, when it comes to my conscience, when I think about a man having sex with a man or a woman having sex with a woman, then my intuition, my conscience says to me loud and clear that that's wrong. And I believe that everyone's got a conscience as well, and I believe that to some degree everyone else deep down is also aware of that moral principle. And that's part of the reason why some people are so sensitive about the issue, because they know deep down that maybe it's something they shouldn't be doing. And also, I think a lot of people who say, oh, I'm absolutely fine with homosexual relationships, I'm cool with that, but I don't like it being taught about in schools, pushing it down their throats. I don't like Pride Month. I think that's over the top. I think sometimes the real reason behind people making those points is that deep down they're actually thinking that they're not okay with it. That they think there's something wrong with homosexual relationships as well. Right, so that's intuition. Next one, reason. Right, what does my reason conclude on this matter? Well, I believe that sex has a purpose, and it's to bond a man and a woman in a permanently committed loving relationship in order to enable procreation, particularly children, therefore creating the family. And that's why sex is pleasurable. Now, whether you believe that's by design or it's evolved, you can still come to the same sort of conclusion. So its purpose is part of a scheme to bind a man and a woman together in order to create family, because that's what works best for children and for adults. And really, sex works like that. I mean, it bonds people together. You can talk about the chemicals that are involved in that, but it's a fact that it does bond people together and makes their long-term stable relationship more likely, therefore increasing the chance that the kids produced by the reproductive biology are likely to be brought up by their mum and a dad who are sticking together. It's best for the kids. And that parental experience gives great joy and meaning to most parents. Now, homosexual sex doesn't fulfill that purpose, obviously. It doesn't produce children, but it often leaves the people involved in the relationship wishing it did produce children, feeling bereft of children, because effectively it's an infertile relationship. So that is a negative, and also it doesn't produce the relationship stability. Now, when people in gay relationships, lesbian relationships, do procure a child by whatever means, then that child is denied the upbringing of either their natural mother or father, which is not good for the child. So also homosexual relationships don't produce stability. They tend to be significantly less stable than heterosexual relationships. And also, if you look at the mental and physical health outcomes, addiction, lots of other things as well, for people engaged in homosexual relationships, they tend to be less positive. It tends to be associated with a lot of problems in a lot of areas. So when we look at the current youth mental health crisis, well, how much of that is related to the fact that young people have been encouraged to experiment with LGBT and whatever else identities, relationships? Well, I think a very significant part of it. Now, you could say, okay, the fact that something doesn't work out well doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. I would say I agree with that, but it supports my conscience and what I'll come to later about revelation. Now, what I've talked about there, the reason aspect of this, I think in terms of what's taught in schools, this is a very important consideration. Children need to be aware of the facts, the philosophy of marriage, the philosophy of sexual relationships, and the facts related to the outcomes of different types of relationships. I think that's really important. Right, the last thing I consider when I'm thinking about what's right and wrong is revelation. Now, as a Christian, I believe that God has spoken to us through the Bible. I don't believe God's just left us to fumble our way through life without any guidance, just to try and guess what it's all about. Now, people of other religions might have different views. You've got no religion. Maybe this bit won't relate to you at all. Now, interpreting the Bible is not just a matter of crude literalism, but on some topics it is clear what the Bible says. I think homosexual relationships is one of those topics where the Bible makes it quite clear that it's not right. It's not God's ideal. It's not God's intention for people to enter into homosexual relationships. I think Christians who try and pretend otherwise are basically just trying to pretend otherwise. It's as simple as that. So, in the light of that teaching, that reason, that moral standard, that raises a lot of issues, obviously, particularly with people who might experience same-sex attraction, because offering the options of celibacy or maybe a change of sexual orientation. And these are serious, potentially difficult issues for an individual. But I believe that the best path for an individual is not to go down the route of a homosexual relationship. I believe the best path through life in terms of their own personal flourishing, development, happiness is, say, either celibacy or a move to a different sexual orientation. Now, of course, this is where the conversion therapy ban comes in and says that you actually can't help people down those roads at all, which is quite cruel. But that's what the Scottish government wants to do. That's what Forbes wants to do as well, is to ban that sort of support for people. But these wider issues, pastoral issues you might call them, they're not what I'm going to talk about in this video. Right, moving on to same-sex marriage now. Now, again, with marriage, the purpose of marriage is a public, lifelong, exclusive commitment. So it's a powerful social institution that encourages stability between a man and woman so that when they have children, that's a stable family unit and the children are brought up by their biological mother and father to the greatest extent possible. And it's a huge benefit to society as a result of that, right? And that's why the government has an interest in it, in recognising marriage. Same-sex marriage doesn't meet those criteria at all. Obviously, it deprives a child of either mum and dad. If there's going to be a child, it doesn't produce the stability. So the state enacts the institution of marriage because it's a good, where same-sex marriage does not fulfill that good, therefore the state should not be endorsing it. Another reason why the state shouldn't declare such a thing as same-sex marriage is I don't believe the state has got the right to just change the definition of a word. I believe also the state can't change the definition of man and woman. They think they can, but they actually can't. They can't change the definition of sister, brother, mother, father. They would like to, but they can't. It's not within their power to change the meanings of terms like that. And the last problem I have with same-sex marriage is basically it's a state endorsement of immorality. So obviously that is not a good thing. So there's been quite a bit of personal opinion there, but coming back to Scottish Family Party policy, we are opposed to same-sex marriage for the reasons I gave above, in terms of it doesn't maximise the number of children who are brought up by their biological parents. Now, in terms of homosexual relationships, the Scottish Family Party doesn't have a policy on whether they're right or wrong. Sometimes people say, what does the Scottish Family Party think of gay relationships? And the answer is the party doesn't think anything about same-sex relationships. But we do take seriously the negative consequences that are well documented for individuals. I mean, it's not for no reason, for example, that the NHS has special pages on its website devoted to help for LGBT and T people. Okay, it's because they experience more negative health outcomes. So I think these issues need to be widely known, and I think particularly young people need to be aware of them so they can make informed decisions in their own life. So Kate, there we are. I've sprung to your defence. I've justified your views. I imagine if you'd watched this video, you'd probably think, oh no, that was the last thing I wanted. Someone trying to explain my own views, to defend the views that hold like that. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what you would think. Right, there's 2 more videos like this to come. One about sex outside marriage and one about judgmental attitudes to abortion. So stay tuned. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.